I think people are wandering up and down with microphones.
Hi, thank you very much for the teachings today, and I hadn't anticipated asking this question, but I will. What advice would you give to a Western woman these days who might contemplate becoming a nun?
Don't. Of course, not necessarily don't, but definitely think it through first. Because, especially if you want to live in the West, there are very few places in which to live in a community and to gain training and to gain support, so that it's we shouldn't romanticize. The Western Sangha are very much in need of support by their own Dharma communities. And normally they do not receive this. They do not receive support from their lamas. They do not receive support from their organizations. So basically, there is no support. So when people say, I want to become a nun, my first question, which is unbelievable to have to ask it, is how are you going to support yourself financially? I mean, you leave the world and then you have to think about finances. So, I mean, it's not so easy. I mean, what the nuns need, and monks, of course, is a support system so that they can live the Dharma life completely and not have to worry about where they're going to live, who's going to feed them, how, with clothes and medicine. All these requisites which the Buddha recommended should be supplied to the monastic sangha by the lay followers. Normally nowadays they are not. They should be, and we would like to see it happening. So, but this is a responsibility of Dharma centers also to help with the support of their monastic sangha, which normally they don't do. So, there are very few places for monastics, Western monastics, to go to gain a proper training and to live together as a community. I mean, Chenrezig is one, but, there are also problems. And an appreciation. The Buddha himself talked always about the Fourfold Sangha and how important the Fourfold Sangha is. The Fourfold Sangha, the Fourfold community are for the ordained monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen, that everybody should have a role to play and that they should all help each other and support each other. So in traditional Buddhist countries, the lay people support the monastic sangha with all their needs. They create monasteries and they make offerings for their food, their medicines, and they donate robes. And in return, the monastics teach the lay people and often help running meditation centers and so forth. In the old days, they also were the doctors, the herbal doctors, the psychiatrists, the counselors, everything. They were a very integral part of the system. And so each one had a role to play. But nowadays, that has broken down. And in the West, although most of the Dhamma practitioners are very devoted lay people, their appreciation for the monastic sangha, unless they happen to be Tibetans, is very minimal. While they will support the lamas, they are not willing to support their own. So in fact, this is the first time in Buddhist history where the monastics are not actually supported by their own lay people, especially in the Tibetan tradition, because in the Tibetan tradition, everybody is encouraged to donate to monasteries back in India and Nepal, and are not encouraged to look at their own native Sangha, their own monks and nuns, and think about their needs and what they need and how they can be supported, in order that, as they develop, they can then again give back to their own community in a language which is native to them. You know, I mean, most Tibetan Lamas come here and don't even speak English. Whereas, you know, foreigners, I'm thinking in Indian terms, Westerners, you know, like yourself, you know, highly educated, obviously with a professional background and understanding of the society in which you're in. If you were properly trained and encouraged and supported, it could be of great benefit to many, many beings. But this hardly happens. And so this is what we need, is that, you know, to encourage people to support their own Sangha and to, you know, not overlook us for the sake of just looking at what the Tibetans, because actually the Tibetans are doing fine. The people who are not doing fine are the Western Sangha.
Thank you. Jetsunma, last year in this venue, in this part of your teachings with question and answer, I thank you for the courage and the example that you have shown all of your life, and I believe as a pioneer, especially for many Western Buddhist women. And again, I thank you for the role that you have played. And I asked you last year, what was something that you have learned through your decades in your nunship, and you said, if something's not okay, say it's not okay. And you said to do that with a calm mind and with strength. And you gave a wonderful example about your nuns going to a nearby monastery and you wanting for them to have cushions provided. And the monks said that women are not allowed to sit on cushions, and you calmly explained that if the cushions were not provided, then you all would need to leave. That's how I remember that story. So my question, and I've thought about that a lot, if something is not okay, to say it's not okay, but to do that without anger or vanity, but to do it in a way which is heard and hopefully effective. And I think you can, you know, if you're confronting racism, I mean, I remember once in a taxi, a very racist taxi driver, you know, I was able to say to him, it's not okay, I don't feel it's okay what you're saying, and I talked about why, and I thought about your words. So today my question is, how now do you measure a sense of success or effectiveness in terms of your, I know you won't like this word, legacy or your contribution to Buddhism, to the monastery? How successful do you feel you've been, and what more would you like to achieve?
Well, I mean, my main aim for the last 20 years basically has been to establish the nunnery in northern India, which gives the opportunity for young women from the Himalayan regions to cultivate their own potential, because it's always like, you know, you can have a very beautiful plant growing, but if you don't water it and put it in the sun and take care of it, even the nicest plant will wither and die. It will maybe come to a bud, but the bud can never open up because it's not being nourished. And so looking at these young girls who came to become nuns, my aspiration was to give them the nourishment and the watering which they needed in order to open up and become what their potential is as a flower. And I would say now, 20 years down the line, they are doing that. I mean, they have now completed their studies, many of them, the first group of 18, received their Acharya award, which is like a kind of master's in philosophy. And we also have a group of nuns who have now finished 10 years in retreat and are still carrying on with their retreat in order to train to be yoginis. The nuns do extremely good rituals. The monks are very impressed. They also dance. They do dakini dancing. And in all ways, they are flowering. I mean, our nunnery is called Dunjagatsuling, which means the garden of the authentic lineage. And to my mind, they are the beautiful flowers in the garden. And they are all blossoming very, very well. Right now, they're in a 1 month Vajrasattva retreat. And next month, in August, they are going to do a month of serious Tibetan grammar studies, which they themselves asked for, because they themselves every year publish a magazine in Tibetan with all their poems and essays and translations and so forth. So they wanted to make sure their Tibetan grammar was immaculate. And so in this way, when I look back at them all, they're good girls. I think running a nunnery is easier than a monastery, especially in this day and age. But they're doing fine. Of course, I mean, this lady's question brought up, you know, the real challenge is not the Himalayan nuns anymore. There are many good nunneries now. The nuns are studying, they're practicing, they're good. They're teachers themselves now, and so forth. So the nuns are doing fine. The challenge for us, of course, is the Western Sangha, which is not doing so well, because they do lack real support, not just financial support, but also psychological support. People, you know, you become a nun and then where do you belong? You know, you don't belong in the lay community anymore, but you also don't really have a monastic sangha that you can feel you're a part of. So for many Western nuns, they feel very lonely and alienated and unappreciated. As I said, many of them come, you know, highly educated women with a lot of life experience who, if they were taken seriously, could genuinely be of great benefit for the Dharma as teachers. But because they are so often, you know, neglected in the face of more glamorous Tibetan alternatives, they again, you know, their potential kind of withers and dies. And we all feel very sorry about this. How to encourage you all to please look at your own Western Sangha sitting here and think, how can I support them? How can I help them? How can I appreciate them? You know, I mean, really, they are your Sangha. These Tibetans, they come from elsewhere, but your Sangha are sitting here right now. And how much do you respect what they have done and what they can give? And how much are you willing to help them and support them? So this is one of my main concerns, you know, and in this it's a struggle to get people to appreciate what they already have here and not be always looking over there where it looks more glamorous. We have an organization called Alliance for Non-Himalayan Nuns, which was set up in order to try to encourage Western nuns to communicate with each other more, because they often feel very isolated. You know, you're in a community. Even if you're in a Dharma center, you're often the only monastic. And many of people, that's if you're fortunate to be in a Dharma center. Otherwise, people living alone, you know, they feel very, very isolated. What can you say? They're lonely. And so we set up this alliance in order, first of all, to try to help nuns to communicate with each other, but also to try to raise some funds so that, you know, in time we want to help as much as possible. I mean, I appreciate it's not the easiest thing when there's so many nuns who are living alone to help them. But, just to be encouraging them to know, even if, one makes small donations, to let them know that you do care. I think that more than anything, even more than finances, is the sense that people respect the life choice that they have made and want to help as much as they can. And just to ask them, what do you need? What can we do to help you? And like this, it's well, as I say, we do have this Alliance of Non-Himalayan Nuns, and we're trying to get people just to be more aware of the problem. Because nuns themselves are not going to speak about it. Of course they're not. But in fact, there is a big problem here. There is a big hiatus between how, for example, in the Tibetan tradition, how the Tibetan Sangha is treated compared with how Western Sangha is treated. Partly because, of course, they assume that all Westerners have a wish-fulfilling tree growing in their backyard and don't need any help, and they don't recognize that, in fact, of course, they do need support. And that, even just the basic 4 requisites of accommodation and food and clothing and medical supplies are beyond the capability of many people. Once they're ordained, they just leave home. But then what? There's no safety net. And as I say, traditionally, this was the responsibility of the lay followers. And since there are not that many Western Sangha, it would be nice to think that they could, the ones that there are, if they're sincere Sangha, good, proper monks and nuns, which most of them are very sincere, that people couldn't get together, at least between themselves, and think, how can we help towards supporting them, so that they're not always, worrying about, where they're going to stay and how they're going to live. So it's a problem because, of course, this is a lifelong commitment for these people when they take ordination, that they have gone forth from home to homelessness. And yet, as I say, there's no safety net there. And so this is a problem. I don't know. I really wish that it would be addressed, especially by the lamas themselves, that they would encourage people. Look at your Sangha, let's appreciate them, help them, support them. This is what you really need to do. These are your people. They can really help you. So I don't know. What can I say? Anyway, let's talk about something else.
I have been reading your book, Into the Heart of Life, and in one part of it, I'm sorry, I hope I'm quoting it correctly, you said that if you can recognize your negative emotion, for instance, anger, and if you can recognize it before you manifest that anger, you can transform it to something more powerful. And I was wondering whether you can elaborate on that.
Okay. So, in all Buddhist schools, one of the fundamental principles is how to deal with our negative emotions, which are normally termed as the 3 poisons. So that is, it starts with as we said this morning, it starts with our basic not knowing who we really are. So therefore it starts with our identification with the ego, which is considered to be our fundamental ignorance, our unknowing. We don't know who we are. And so because we identify with this sense of me, therefore anything which looks like it would give pleasure to me, we reach out and want to grasp and hold on to. And so that is the fundamental greed aspect of the mind, or something which does not give pleasure to me through the sense doors, eyes, ears, nose, taste, touch, thought, something which is unpleasing, then we have aversion, we want to push it away, we don't like it. We can even get very angry. So that is the anger side of it. So all of this is like a triangle. In a wheel of life, it shows at the center of the wheel is this snake and a pig and a cockerel. So the pig represents ignorance, and then the cockerel is greed and lust, and the snake is anger. So they're each biting each other's tails. So they're going round and round and round and round. And that turns the whole wheel. At the hub is these three little animals. And so always in Buddhism, how to deal with this basic greed, aversion, based on ignorance in our mind. Now the good news is that it's not inherent. Inherent is our Buddha nature, which is way beyond that. These defilements of the mind, these afflictions of the mind are called adventitious. Adventitious means that they are not inherent. Right? If they were inherent, then we could never get rid of them. But because they are not inherent, therefore we can. It's like apart from the gold and the mud, think of silver. Now, if we don't polish silver, then it gets tarnished. And so it gets all this black eventually. And then if we look at it, all we see is the black. But if we polish it, then the black is removed and the silver has never been polluted. The tarnish is adventitious. It's not inherent to the silver. So that's like our true nature of the mind is completely pure. And it doesn't matter how tarnished it may be. That never, ever, ever, ever can affect the purity of our inherent nature. So we are inherently pure. But in the meantime, we're kind of messed up, like clouds in the sky. So in all Buddhist schools, how to deal with this? So one way is by transforming anger into patience or loving kindness and compassion, transforming greed into letting go, into contentment, into generosity, and our ignorance, of course, gradually into seeing things more clearly how they truly are. So that idea of taking the negative principle and working with that negative principle to transform it into a very positive principle. For example, if in the mind training teachings, if you meet with people who are very difficult and make us angry, then instead of being angry with them, we can appreciate them as a wonderful opportunity for practicing patience, which is a very important quality needed in order to attain to awakening. We have many qualities apart from meditation. One is patience. We cannot learn to be patient unless somebody annoys us. I mean, if you're with people who are all lovely, then you're lovely. It's easy. Everybody smiles, and then you smile back and you think, oh, I'm really quite a nice person, actually. And then you come across somebody who doesn't smile at you and can be very rude or very difficult and does not do or say what you want, and the ego comes up, So at that time, to snap into thinking, thank you, you're so horrible. You are my wonderful object of patience. I should learn. How can I learn patience if it wasn't for kind people like you? And so in this way, through the mind training, they use it in that way, especially with anger and these kind of very negative feelings. using various skillful means to take that anger in itself and transform it into a very, very positive emotion instead. But in the Vajrayana, and also in all the mind teachings of meditation, then when feelings come up to as the anger or greed, lust, jealousy, pride, any negative emotion comes up of fear, to observe it nakedly and to see, just look at it. What does it look like? What does it feel like? I have this anger. Where is the anger in the body? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And if possible, to embrace it with loving kindness or anger. Especially if, during, meditation, sometimes very strong feelings come up of anger or jealousy or fear. From nowhere, they just come up. Then instead of trying to push them back down again, or, get up and make yourself a cup of tea, sit with it, look at it. Just try to look straight into it, but with friendliness. But what we were talking about in that one, I'll come back to that, but what we were talking about is that in the Vajrayana, it is regarded that our negative emotions are connected with a deep source of wisdom energy. And that normally this inherent wisdom energy gets distorted into anger, greed, and so forth, lust and jealousy and all these things. It got distorted. But the original source is a very powerful wisdom. And so if at the moment of the arising of a powerful negative emotion, in that instant, if we can see it nakedly, without reacting, of itself it will transform. But if by the time we're a bit down the path of feeling frustrated, angry, and ready to get them, it's already too late. Then we have to use one of the other skillful means of, transforming anger into patience and so forth. It only works if we are so habituated to observing the mind that at the moment of the arising of a strong negative emotion, we recognize it, and then in that moment of seeing is the moment of transformation. So in that case, you don't have to do anything. It of itself will transform. But as I say, unless we catch it in that moment of arising, it's too late. So that's where that came from. The mandala, in Vajrayana they have the mandala, which is 4 directions in the center. And within the mandala there is colors, there is the Buddhas, of course, and then there are the skandha, the bodily forms, and the colors, elements, all in 5, each belonging to a different Buddha family. And there are the wisdoms, each belonging to a different Buddha family, but there are also the klesha. There is also the afflictive emotion belonging to that family. So, for example, anger belongs to the family of Akshobhya Buddha in the East, and that corresponds to a mirror-like wisdom. And so each of the wisdoms has its corresponding natural affliction. So that is. I remember one time I was with one Lama and I said something which he got very upset about. And in that moment, his face went all red. And the next moment, his eyes went up and then... I mean, in the moment that it arose, the moment he saw it, and then it just transformed, and then it was perfectly okay. And then you could see he wasn't suppressing it, he was just fine. cloud came, poof, gone. But there's a story, I don't know if it's Milarepa or some other yogi, in which he goes back to his cave, and there are all these demons sitting there. And so Milarepa starts to recite some wrathful mantras to dispel them. And they're all just sitting there. All right, well, that didn't work. So then he sits down and he meditates on emptiness. Empty, empty, empty. Opens his eyes, they're just looking at him. So then he says, okay, fine, you're welcome, be my guests. Let's all have a cup of tea. So then he turns around, he starts making tea, lights the fire, boils up the water, and makes the tea, and then he turns around, and all these wrathful deities had turned into beautiful local gods. And they said, you are our guru, and we will follow you and support the Dharma. And everybody looking beautiful and smiling. So this is the point. If we resist our negative things, we try to suppress them, or we tell ourselves without realization, oh, you're all empty, 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 but what's empty? It doesn't work. They just laugh at us. But if we embrace them and say, what's your problem? Why are you feeling like that? Tell me all about it. Then maybe they transform. We shouldn't be afraid of our negative emotions. Especially in meditation. Of course, during the day, we have to deal with things and transform. But in meditation, when feelings come up, strong feelings, we should befriend them. We should welcome them and like mentally embrace them and ask them to tell us what's their problem. Not deny them or turn away from them. Just love them. What is it? What are you afraid of? What's the problem? And listen.